I died working 3 jobs to take care of my sick husband, his fake sister and their secret love child. On my deathbed they thanked me by asking me to sign my treatment waiver. But fate gave me a second chance. This time, I slapped the husband, locked up the brat, exposed the mistress and inherited every dollar. He left me a will he thought would chain me. I turned it into a weapon. Now I'm the widow who made them all kneel. They say love is sacrifice. But no one ever tells you what happens when all your sacrifices are for the wrong man. I was still wearing my work scrubs when Evelyn, my mother-in-law, burst into the waiting room, eyes swollen from crying. "Clara," she choked, clutching my arm. "Ethan wants to see you. He's awake." I dropped everything and followed her through the corridors of Ridgeview Medical Center. The sharp scent of disinfectant and quiet murmurs from nurses faded into a blur as we reached room 214, the ICU. My husband, Ethan Carter, lay hooked to tubes, pale and trembling but alive. "Clara," he whispered, his lips dry and cracked. "I don't have much time." I froze, feeling my knees nearly buckle. "Don't say that. You're getting better. I need you to listen." His voice was faint but urgent. "I've made a will. Everything, my savings, the house, it's all yours." My breath caught. "Ethan." "But," he added, and his hand tightened slightly around mine, "I want you to take care of my mom. And Vanessa. And Mason. His so-called adopted sister and her child." I nodded, tears spilling down my face. "Of course I will. I promise." He gave a weak smile. "I always knew you were the one I could count on. Back then I thought I was chosen. Cherished. I couldn't have been more wrong." In the months that followed, I threw myself into work. Pulling triple shifts at the hospital, tutoring students on weekends and freelancing for medical research summaries at night. Every dollar I made went into our family. Groceries. School supplies for Mason. Medication for Ethan. Electric bills. Mortgage. By the time Ethan was finally well enough to walk unassisted, I was half dead myself. But I didn't complain. At night I'd quietly massage his legs, tuck Mason into bed and help Evelyn with her prescriptions. Vanessa would stay up late on the couch scrolling her phone while I cleaned dishes, pretending not to notice. I was the perfect wife. The perfect daughter-in-law. The perfect fool. 10 years passed like that, a blur of sacrifice and silent suffering. Until the day my vision blurred and I collapsed at the pharmacy counter. They diagnosed me with end-stage liver failure. Autoimmune, the doctor had said, but I knew the truth. My body was simply done. I was only 38. I remember lying on that cold hospital bed, the beeping of machines fading into the background and watching Ethan walk in. He wasn't alone. Vanessa stood beside him, holding his hand. I blinked slowly, confusion and horror mixing in my chest. "Oh my," she said sweetly, pretending to be surprised. "You saw us, didn't you?" Ethan didn't let go of her hand. Vanessa tilted her head and gave a fake pout. "Well, no use hiding it now. I was Ethan's first love, you know. Before he met you. We thought we could never be together, but fate gave us a second chance." My lips trembled. "You're not his sister?" She laughed. "Sister? Please. That was just a story Evelyn cooked up. We needed a reason to move in. And Mason?" She looked down at the boy beside her, now a confident 17-year-old. "He's Ethan's biological son. Didn't you ever notice how much they look alike?" No wonder Evelyn had insisted we adopt Vanessa and her child all those years ago. I'd always thought it strange. Why insist on adoption instead of charity? Now I knew. It was so she could see her grandson every day under the same roof. So I could raise their child. Feed them. Fund their future. The pain tore through me like fire. "You two, you're monsters," I rasped. "You deserve to rot." I tried to rise, to claw, to scream, but I had no strength left. Vanessa smirked. "Relax. We're only here to ask you to sign the waiver for your treatment. And of course to thank you." Ethan stepped forward, brushing my hair back like he actually cared. "Don't be angry, Clara. The person I really loved was never you. But I do appreciate everything you've done for me. We'll make sure your funeral is arranged properly," Vanessa added with a saccharine smile. My vision swam. I felt the taste of iron in my mouth. Blood. And then, blackness. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting in the hospital corridor again. I blinked in confusion. There was no pain. No tubes. No My body, it was strong. Yum. Before I could process what was happening, Evelyn rushed up to me just like before. Clara. Come quick. Ethan's awake, he wants to talk to you. I followed her numbly into the room. And there he was, weak, pale, hooked to machines. Just like before. Vanessa stood to his left, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Mason, only 7 years old again, clung to her skirt. It was happening again. But this time I wasn't the same woman. Ethan looked at me with that same solemn gaze. Clara. I've made a will. Everything will be yours. The house, the savings. All I ask is that you take care of my mom. And Vanessa. And Mason. In my past life I had broken down sobbing, overwhelmed with emotion. This time, I just smiled coldly. I don't want it, I said. His face shifted. What? I only want what rightfully belongs to me. Nothing more. Nothing less. There was silence. Vanessa's brows furrowed, but she stayed quiet. Evelyn looked confused but wary. Ethan gave me a faint smile, trying again. Clara, you're my wife. I have no one else to entrust them to. Please, grant me this dying wish. Dying wish. I repeated softly. You seem healthy enough to bargain. Vanessa stepped forward, sniffling. How can you be so heartless? He's literally begging you. I turned to her, voice ice. Don't worry, Vanessa. After everything Ethan's done for you, I'm sure you'll take good care of his family. She blinked. Why should I? You're not his sister, remember? I said sweetly. And Evelyn's not mine. So surely you'll be the better caretaker, won't you? Her mouth snapped shut. I turned back to Ethan. I'm not your nurse, your maid, or your martyr. I'm your wife. And if you want that to mean anything, start acting like it. I walked out before any of them could respond. That night, I sat alone in our bedroom, staring at the pale yellow walls I had painted myself 10 years ago. I remembered the sleepless nights, the meals reheated 3 times before I had a chance to eat, the heavy bags under my eyes from stress and exhaustion. And for what? To be discarded when I broke? Not again. Fate had given me a second chance. I would use it wisely. I would take back my name, my time, my power. Let them beg. Let them suffer. Let them feel the weight of the chains they once hung around my neck. This time I wouldn't die for Ethan Carter's will. I'd make sure he lived to regret it. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of Ethan. Not because of guilt. But because of how alive I felt. It was a strange thing, really, to wake up in your own past and know exactly how the story ends. To look at the people you once bled for and feel nothing but cold detachment. The second chance I'd been given wasn't a blessing. It was a weapon. And I intended to use it. The next morning I returned to Ethan's room. He looked worse. Pale and thin beneath those hospital sheets, with a dozen machines beeping quietly beside him. Vanessa sat nearby, Mason asleep in her lap like a tiny innocent. Innocent. Ah. Clara, Ethan said, trying to smile. Have you thought about it? I forced a gentle look, even tilted my head like the loving wife they expected. Of course I have. I'll do my part, Ethan. Vanessa let out a theatrical sigh of relief. Evelyn dabbed her eyes with a tissue, her face full of practiced gratitude. But behind my smile I was already planning their destruction. When Ethan was finally discharged from the hospital, the drama began almost immediately. I just don't have the strength to take care of him, Evelyn said with a heavy sigh, plopping down on the couch as if she hadn't been perfectly fine folding laundry just 5 minutes ago. My knees can't handle the strain. Same here, Vanessa added, adjusting Mason's bib. With a growing child and no nanny, I barely get sleep. Plus, I don't have any medical training, you know. Their eyes landed on me in perfect sync. Claire, the dependable one. The giving one. Oh. I set down my tea slowly and gave them a polite smile. I'd love to help. But I'm working double shifts. Triple actually. And I'm considering a side gig just to keep up with expenses. Vanessa frowned. Oh, still. I hummed. Medical bills. Mortgage. Food. And with Ethan still recovering, someone's gotta keep the lights on. Their expressions soured just a little. Evelyn tried a softer approach. Maybe, during your lunch break? You can just swing by, check on him quickly. That's a great idea, Vanessa chimed in. And at night you'll be home anyway. You can keep an eye on him then. I mean, it'd be a bit awkward for me, right? Being, well, not really his sister. I looked her dead in the eye and said, you sleep just fine under the same roof. Why not under the same responsibility? Vanessa's jaw tightened, but she couldn't argue without exposing herself. The guilt trip wasn't working. Eventually they were forced into a rotation. Evelyn on Mondays and Thursdays. Vanessa on Tuesdays and Fridays. Saturdays and Sundays were up for debate. I took Wednesdays, purely symbolic. It was hilarious watching them argue about who had the harder day. Vanessa even faked a headache once and claimed Mason was running a fever, hoping to get out of her turn. I watched with amusement, sipping my tea. I had no intention of returning to the role of martyr. Back in my past life, I'd raced home from work every day. I'd cook special meals just for Ethan, listen for every cough, fluff every pillow. I even kept a chair by his bed so I could sleep sitting up, ready to help him at a moment's notice. This time, I spent my lunch breaks in cozy cafes. Some days I wandered bookstores. Other times I window shopped or enjoyed a quiet meal, savoring each bite like a tiny rebellion. I didn't come home until after 10 p.m. Not too early to be assigned chores. Not too late to avoid suspicion. Just enough to stay out of reach. Of course, it didn't take long for the freeloaders to strike again. One night I walked into the living room to find all three of them sitting together. A rare occurrence and never a good sign. Vanessa rose with a sweet smile. Clara, Mom and I were just talking. We think it's better if you handle nighttime care for Ethan. Because you're his wife, Evelyn added with that fake maternal tone she thought fooled me. It's just more appropriate. I mean, Vanessa continued, pressing a hand dramatically to her chest, I'm an outsider technically. It wouldn't look right for me to stay in his room. People might talk. I almost burst out laughing. People? You mean the 4 people who live in this house? Or are the walls going to gossip now? Vanessa's mouth opened and shut. I stepped closer. Let me ask you both something. Who raised Mason? You did, Evelyn answered automatically, then caught herself. Who worked triple shifts to pay off Ethan's last medical bill? You did, Vanessa mumbled. So tell me again why I should give up my sleep to sit by a man who can't even thank me properly. Their silence was delightful. I'm going to shower, I said, tossing my bag onto the chair. Good luck figuring it out. Later that night, just as I curled into bed with a book, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Mason standing there, holding a tattered workbook. His eyes were wide and watery, practiced, manipulative. Aunt Clara, he whispered. I need money for school books. Mama says she doesn't have any. I leaned against the doorframe. That's sad. He looked confused. So, can I have some? I smiled kindly. Oh, sweetheart. I wish I could, but you see, all my money is going toward your uncle's treatment. He's very sick, remember? His lips parted. He blinked. But maybe your mom can ask her brother, I added with a wink. Oh, wait. He blinked again slowly. I shut the door before he could process the insult. Sure enough, minutes later I heard muffled arguing from Vanessa's room. She was yelling. I told you to ask nicely. What do you mean she said no? Music to my ears. The next morning Vanessa wouldn't meet my eyes. Evelyn avoided me altogether. Ethan, still recovering in his room, asked if I could cook something light for him. I smiled and handed him an app coupon. They deliver. By the end of the week they were all looking frayed. The rotation was barely holding. I overheard Evelyn muttering about her back and Vanessa complaining about being too young to be a nurse. Meanwhile, Mason was banned from speaking to me, not that I cared. I dressed well, stayed out late, and came home smelling like rose water and independence. They didn't recognize me anymore. Good. They were never supposed to. One evening, I caught Vanessa watching me as I applied lipstick in the hallway mirror. You seem different lately, she said. I shrugged. Maybe I just got tired of being pathetic. She blinked. I left before she could reply. This second chance wasn't about revenge alone. It was about freedom. And I had finally learned the most important lesson. When you stop giving, takers don't know what to do. Let them scramble. Let them panic. The widow they betrayed was still breathing. And this time, she was done saving anyone but herself. The thing about parasites is, they can't survive without a host. By the end of week 3, I could practically feel the desperation radiating off Vanessa and Evelyn like heat waves. Vanessa was snapping at Mason for minor things. Evelyn was constantly resting with a damp towel over her eyes, muttering about low blood pressure. Ethan had recovered enough to move around, but still expected everyone to orbit around his needs like devoted satellites. Except I was no longer in orbit. I came and went as I pleased. I spent more time out of the house than in it. It was glorious. But freeloaders don't give up easily. Especially not when they smell power slipping through their fingers. It was a Thursday evening when the storm finally came. I had a business dinner scheduled with my boss and a few colleagues. We were negotiating a corporate wellness proposal, and I'd spent the past week preparing every detail. I even treated myself to a new dress. Navy silk, modest neckline, sharp heels. Power dressed. By 7:30 p.m., we were seated at Ember and Oak, the most elegant steakhouse in the city. I was sipping wine, confidently discussing strategy across from my boss, Mr. Donovan, when I caught a blur of familiar movement near the entrance. Oh, it couldn't be. I turned my head slightly. Oh, but it could. Vanessa was standing in the doorway, eyes locked on me like a bloodhound on a scent. Behind her was Ethan, limping slightly, wearing the same pathetic gray sweater I had washed by hand a dozen times in our last life. I stared, utterly unimpressed. Vanessa marched up first, her eyes flicking to Mr. Donovan, then to me, narrowing with faux hurt. "Clara," she said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "I thought you were working another shift. What is this?" I didn't answer. Ethan arrived next, voice already rising. "Is this what you've been doing? Dressing up for some other man while your husband is still recovering at home?" I closed my eyes. God, it was worse than I thought. They were pulling the public humiliation card. "Excuse me," Mr. Donovan said cautiously. "Who are you?" "I'm her husband," Ethan growled. "And that's my sister. The woman my wife is supposed to be helping raise our child. Instead, she's out here having expensive dinners behind our backs." Gasps erupted around us. A couple at the next table turned. The manager at the bar froze mid-pour. People were already whispering. "She's cheating on a sick man? She doesn't even look ashamed. And with her boss?" I felt the heat of every eye in the room. Vanessa, of course, was soaking in the attention. "Clara," she said sweetly, "we trusted you. Ethan even put your name on everything. His will, his savings, the house, and this is how you repay him." I glanced at Mr. Donovan. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing. My pulse was steady. My hands, folded neatly on the table, didn't tremble. But inside, I was furious. They'd followed me here. They had stalked me. Planned this. Orchestrated it like a scene from some second-rate soap opera. And just when I was about to speak, a voice sliced through the tension like a knife. "Is there a problem here?" I turned. Standing behind Vanessa was a tall woman in a burgundy pantsuit, sleek ponytail, sharp eyes. She looked like she belonged on the cover of Forbes. Her name was Cassidy, my boss's girlfriend. Also a corporate attorney. And, incidentally, one of my closest friends from grad school. She stepped forward, placing a possessive hand on Mr. Donovan's shoulder. "This is a private business dinner," she said coolly. "You're disturbing our meeting." Vanessa blinked. "And who are you?" "I'm his girlfriend," Cassidy said. "And Clara's friend. And an attorney. Would you like me to list those in order of importance?" Ethan paled. Cassidy turned to the gathering crowd. "Just so we're clear, Clara is not cheating. She's an employee. This is a work dinner. And these two people," she gestured to Ethan and Vanessa with a pointed look, "have no right to barge in and defame her character in a public setting." The room fell silent. Cassidy wasn't done. "And," she added, "since you both seem concerned about Clara's moral compass, shall we discuss yours?" Vanessa stiffened. "What do you mean?" Cassidy's voice was pleasant. "Deadly. You're not actually Ethan's sister, are you?" Vanessa's eyes widened. Cassidy smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Because I've seen you two before. Holding hands. At the hospital. Kissing actually. So if you want to play moral police, be prepared to get audited." The silence became suffocating. Someone at the next table let out a shocked whisper. Another murmured, "She's not even his sister?" Ethan stumbled backward. Vanessa's face turned blotchy red. "Let's go," Ethan muttered, grabbing her arm. "But," she started. "Now, Vanessa." They left without another word. As the door closed behind them, I let out a slow breath. Cassidy slid into the chair beside me. "You okay?" "I'm going to bake you cookies for the rest of the year," I murmured. Mr. Donovan coughed into his napkin. Well, that was dramatic. Cassidy winked. Welcome to dating a drama magnet. Back at home the atmosphere was suffocating. I returned late that night and Ethan was waiting. He was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, face dark. You embarrassed me. I walked past him toward the kitchen. You made me look like a fool. I paused and looked over my shoulder. You did that all by yourself, Ethan. I'm your husband. No, I said, opening the fridge. You're my liability. He stared at me, stunned. The next morning, I woke to the scent of burning toast and the sound of forced laughter downstairs. They were pretending nothing had happened. Vanessa's voice floated up the staircase like a sour perfume. Mason, sit up straight. We're a proper family. Proper family. That one almost made me laugh. I showered slowly, dressed in a silk blouse and tailored slacks, and walked down like I hadn't been ambushed in public by the very people now buttering dry toast in my kitchen. Ethan sat at the head of the table like a wounded king. Vanessa was beside him, pretending to be shy and obedient. Evelyn stirred her tea dramatically, casting occasional glances my way. No one said anything. Perfect. But I had something to say. After breakfast I found Ethan alone in the study. He was flipping through the day's mail, pretending to be important. Let's talk about the savings, I said, calm and clear. He looked up. What about them? How much is left? He blinked. Around 200, maybe 250. I tilted my head. That's interesting. Last I checked it was closer to 500,000. He shifted in his seat. Medical bills, he said too quickly. And groceries. And Mason's school. Show me the bank book, I said. He hesitated. My mom keeps it. She's asleep. I leaned against the doorframe. She gets up before the sun to water her fake orchids, Ethan. Try again. He laughed awkwardly. It's not a big deal. I'll bring it to you later. I didn't blink. I want to see it now. His face twitched. That was when I knew he had touched the money. Just like in our past life. Back then I never asked. Never questioned. I assumed we were in it together. Our work he saved. We built a life. But the truth was he siphoned off almost everything, gifting it to Evelyn and Vanessa while I scrambled to keep the lights on. Not this time. I straightened my spine. Let me remind you, most of that money came from my dowry and wedding gifts. Do you really want to pretend it belongs to you? His jaw clenched. I left the study without another word. An hour later the bank book appeared on the kitchen counter like magic. $513,600. I smiled to myself. I could practically hear him scrambling to transfer the money back overnight to cover his tracks. He was terrified. Good. At lunch, Vanessa decided to try a new tactic. You know, she began, spearing a cherry tomato with her fork. This house has really been a blessing for all of us. I didn't respond. Evelyn jumped in. Yes, but with the mortgage still hanging over us, I've been thinking, maybe we should pay it off now. While Ethan's still recovering. It'd be one less worry for him. Vanessa nodded solemnly. Exactly. And you're the only one working, Clara. If we combine your savings with what's left from Ethan's account. No. The word was quiet, but it stopped them cold. I'm not using my money to pay off this house, I said simply. Vanessa blinked. But Ethan said he'd add your name to the deed once it's cleared. I set down my fork. That's generous. Except, the house isn't under his name, is it? Their silence was answer enough. I smiled. It's under Evelyn's. Always has been. Evelyn flushed. That's just for convenience. No, that's to keep me off it legally, I said. So if Ethan dies tomorrow, I'm left with nothing. Again. You're being paranoid, Vanessa said with a brittle laugh. I'm being smart, I corrected. Ethan entered the room just then, catching the tail end of the conversation. Clara, he said calmly, you don't have to be so dramatic. I've already promised. Once the mortgage is cleared, I'll put your name on it. I leaned back in my chair. But you won't be paying it off. I will. With money that was always mine. So tell me, why would I buy a house that legally belongs to someone else? His expression darkened. So you're saying, you won't help at all? I'm saying, I said, rising to my feet, I'm done playing the fool. That evening Ethan followed me upstairs. I was folding laundry when he spoke. You're drawing lines, he said quietly. Yes, I replied without looking up. Bold ones. You used to be generous. I used to be delusional. He stepped closer. I'm still your husband. I looked at him then. Really looked. He wasn't even trying to fake sincerity anymore. He was trying to control me through habit, through the memory of the woman I used to be. Let me make something clear, I said slowly. You don't get to sabotage me and then ask for loyalty. I never sabotaged you, he snapped. You used me, I said. You let me work 3 jobs while you played dying prince. You let your mistress live in our home. You watched me raise your child, then stood by while she thanked me by taking my place. He froze. I folded the last shirt, placed it gently in the basket, then turned to him. You drained my savings. You buried my health. You nearly cost me my life. He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. You don't get to talk now. He shut it. I picked up the basket and walked past him. But just as I reached the door, I paused and said over my shoulder, You asked me to take care of this family. I will. He looked up surprised. But not the way you think. The next morning I made coffee and watched from the kitchen as Evelyn flipped through bills. Vanessa sat at the dining table on her phone, pretending not to be listening. I've decided, I said casually. I'm not helping with the mortgage. Evelyn looked up sharply. But we can't afford it. I know. Then what are we going to do? That's your house, I said with a smile. You figure it out. Vanessa stood up. You're punishing us for something Ethan did? No, I said. I'm punishing myself for not doing this 10 years ago. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Because she didn't. They had all memorized a version of me that no longer existed. Claire the provider. Claire the peacekeeper. Claire the sacrifice. But this version? This Claire was different. She knew who the money belonged to. She knew what loyalty was worth and what it wasn't. And she was done funding their fairy tale. That night Ethan knocked on my door. Can we talk? I opened it, leaned against the frame. Make it quick. He hesitated. We need a solution. My mom, she can't make the mortgage payments. Then she should sell the house. His eyes widened. It's her home. And my money is mine, I said. I didn't marry into this family to become your financial savior. He swallowed. You're different. People change. I said quietly. He didn't say anything. I shut the door. And this time I locked it. There's something beautiful about silence after war. But in this house, even peace was a performance. For 3 days after I refused to fund the mortgage, the entire Carter household moved around me like ghosts. Passive-aggressive sighs from Evelyn. Long, dramatic silences from Ethan. Vanessa slamming cabinet doors a little louder than necessary. No one said anything directly. But they all wanted me to crack. They underestimated how calm someone could be after coming back from death. It was on the 4th day that things boiled over. And I knew the moment I walked into the living room and saw all 3 of them waiting, that it was going to be that kind of night. Ethan stood as I entered, hands shaking slightly. Clara, he began, voice brittle, we need to talk. Vanessa was sitting straight-backed like she was at a courtroom trial. Evelyn clutched her teacup like it was a holy relic. Mason surprisingly sat on the stairs, fidgeting with a toy car. I crossed my arms. Make it quick. Ethan's jaw twitched. We can't go on like this. You've been selfish. You refused to help with the house, with my recovery, with anything. Interesting, I said, since I've already helped more than anyone here. Or have you forgotten who paid off the last 3 medical emergencies? Who bought groceries for a household of 5? Who gave up 10 years of her life? Vanessa stood. Don't pretend you're the only one who's ever sacrificed. You married into this family. You knew what you were signing up for. Oh, you mean raising your child while you stayed home and painted your nails? I laughed. Yeah. I definitely didn't sign up for that. Ethan's voice rose. You're heartless. And that was it. The word settled in the room like poison. It echoed. Heartless. I stepped forward, slowly, closing the distance between us. Say it again, I said softly. Ethan squared his shoulders. I said, you're heartless. My hand met his face with a sharp crack. Silence. He stumbled back, stunned. You've used me, I said. Deceived me. Betrayed me. And you have the audacity to call me heartless. Vanessa lunged. How dare you hit him? She didn't finish the sentence. My palm caught her cheek with equal force, sending her staggering into the arm of the couch. This time the silence was thicker. Even Evelyn dropped her teacup. Vanessa's eyes burned with fury. You crazy. And then I felt it. Something sharp hit the back of my leg. I turned. Mason stood behind me, clutching a toy sword like a tiny soldier. His eyes were full of hate, far too mature for a 7-year-old. Don't hit my mommy, he yelled and swung again, catching me in the thigh. I stared at him. No shock. No fear. Just disgust. Without a word, I grabbed him by the collar, lifted him off the ground as he kicked and flailed, and carried him to the spare guest room. What are you doing? Vanessa screamed, racing after me. I ignored her, opened the door and threw Mason inside. He hit the carpet with a thud. Before he could get up, I slammed the door shut and turned the lock. You're insane. Vanessa shrieked from behind me, pounding her fists on the door. He's a child. Let him out. Let him out right now. Evelyn's voice trembled. Clara, please. Don't hurt him. I leaned against the doorframe and stared at them, unfazed. Hurt him? He's lucky I didn't raise him the way you all raised your son. Because unlike the rest of you, I know how to teach a brat boundaries. Inside, Mason screamed and banged his fists against the door. I raised my voice slightly, addressing the room. This is the product of your parenting. A boy who hits women because he sees his mother do it. A boy who thinks tantrums are tools. He's learned from the best. Evelyn looked horrified. Vanessa looked ready to kill me. You've gone too far, Ethan hissed. Really? I laughed. Was it too far when Vanessa called me heartless for refusing to fund her future? Was it too far when you let your mother guilt-trip me into running this household alone while you were busy playing dead? Vanessa shrieked. You're just mad because you don't have a child of your own. And that earned her another slap. Harder than before. This time her lips split. She crumpled to the floor with a gasp. No one moved. No one dared. I raised that child, I said, voice trembling with fury. I fed him, bathed him, dressed him, comforted him when he cried. And the first time he ever smiled at me, you were off at some hotel with Ethan. So don't you dare talk to me about motherhood. Evelyn finally dropped to her knees. Claire, please. Don't be like this. I was wrong. We were all wrong. Just let Mason out. I crossed my arms. Say it again. Louder. We were wrong, she said, sobbing. Vanessa, groaning on the floor, managed a bitter cough. Fine. I was wrong too. Just let my son go. I nodded. That's better. I unlocked the door. Mason came stumbling out, cheeks wet, red-faced and breathless. He didn't look at me. He ran straight to Vanessa, burying his face in her lap. Ethan picked him up and backed away like I was a wild animal. I turned to the cabinet, pulled out the bank book and slid it into my purse. I'm taking what's mine, I said. Everything else. Keep it. You'll need it. Clara, Evelyn croaked. Where are you going? Away from here. I slung my coat over my arm and headed for the front door. You'll regret this, Ethan muttered, still holding Mason like a shield. I turned back one last time. You had 10 years to be a good man. A good son. A good father. You chose cowardice instead. Vanessa whimpered something behind him. And you, I added, can keep pretending he ever loved you. Just know, he only stayed because I funded this fantasy. I opened the door. The air outside was cold. Cleansing. I took a deep breath, stepped out and didn't look back. Not when Evelyn began crying. Not when Mason called out my name. Not even when Ethan slammed the door behind me. For the next few weeks I stayed at my parents' place. I slept without interruption. Ate without guilt. Breathed without feeling like I was choking. No one asked me for money. No one called me heartless. No one handed me guilt disguised as love. The bank account stayed untouched and I made sure to quietly freeze the shared credit card before they drained it again. I didn't need revenge in grand, cinematic gestures. I just needed to live. To be free. To not die unloved in a house I built for everyone but myself. They could keep the wreckage. I had taken back my life. And the peace that came with it was worth every slap. Freedom tasted like ginger tea and warm blankets. It had been exactly 33 days since I left the Carter house. 33 days without Mason's tantrums, Evelyn's theatrics or Vanessa's smug little smirks. 33 days of peace. I had gotten a part-time consulting job at a private clinic, spent lazy weekends with my parents, and even binge-watched 3 dramas without anyone telling me to lower the volume. I had almost forgotten what it was like to live without being someone else's lifeline. Then came the call. From an unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "This is Clara." A breath. Then a woman's voice, panicked. He's back in the hospital. Then. "It's serious this time." "I see. He's asking for you." I didn't respond right away. "Ma'am?" the nurse prompted. "Which hospital?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. "Ridgeview Medical. Room 214. Of course. The same hospital. The same room. I should have ignored it. Blocked the number and moved on. But something pulled me back. Curiosity? Closure? I wasn't sure. I just knew that if this really was the end for Ethan Carter, I wanted to watch him face it. I arrived late that evening. The hallways smelled the same. Sterile, faintly citrus, and too clean to feel human. Nurses nodded at me with quiet sympathy. A few even whispered my name behind my back. I didn't care. I walked into room 214 without knocking. Ethan was thinner now. His cheeks hollow. His skin dull. Machines beeped around him like a countdown clock. But he was awake. Barely. His eyes fluttered open when he heard my heels. And then he smiled. A weak, broken smile. "You came back, too." My heart stopped. For a second I just stood there. Silent. "You remember," I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded, eyes glossy. I didn't believe it at first. But then, the way things played out, it was all the same. Except this time, you left. "I should have left earlier," I said simply. He coughed, the sound ragged and wet. "I thought, if I kept you in, you'd stay. But I had time. You had 10 years. He closed his eyes. "I know." I stepped closer, just enough to see the fear in his eyes. "I tried," he whispered. "This time I really did. But it didn't matter. It all fell apart anyway." "You were given a second chance," I said, "and you used it to make the same mistakes." "I didn't know how to stop," he rasped. Everything felt too familiar. Like a script I couldn't change. I folded my arms. And yet I changed. He nodded weakly. "That's why I called you." I waited. He swallowed hard, then looked at me with eyes full of regret. "Take care of them. One last time. Please." I leaned in close. Closer than I'd ever been to him since the day I walked out. So close I could see the faint scar near his jaw, the one I used to kiss goodnight. Then I said clearly, slowly, like an oath. "Keep dreaming." He flinched. "Clara. I spent a lifetime dying for your family. I'm not wasting this one doing the same." Tears pooled at the corners of his eyes. "But I love you." "You never loved me," I said. "You loved what I gave you. What I covered for you." I was wrong. Too late. He tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back. "I already forgave you once," I whispered. "It cost me everything. I'm not paying that price again." The machines beeped louder. Faster. A nurse rushed in. "His vitals are unstable. We need a decision, now." She looked at me. "He signed you as next of kin." I nodded. "Do you wish to continue life support?" I looked at Ethan one last time. There was no defiance in his eyes now. Just a man who had played all his cards and lost. "No," I said. "Let him go." The nurse hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Completely." She nodded and quietly turned off the monitors. I didn't stay to watch him die. I left the room before the machines went silent. Before his breath hitched for the last time. Before Evelyn came running with her fake sobs. I didn't owe them a single second more. I stood outside the hospital, breathing in the night air. It was cool, sharp against my skin. The kind of cold that cleared your thoughts. The wind carried a hint of rain, but I didn't mind. Ethan Carter was gone. Not just in this life. In both. He had taken 2 chances and used them both to hurt the one woman who would have walked through fire for him. And now, he would never hurt anyone again. By morning the news had spread. Evelyn called me 6 times. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat by the window of my parents' sunroom with a cup of tea and watched the sunrise, knowing this one would be different. Lighter. Warmer. Free. They buried Ethan on a gray Thursday morning. Not that the sky needed to match the mood, but it did anyway, thick clouds hanging low as if the heavens were watching with tired disappointment. It hadn't rained yet, but the air was swollen with it, heavy and damp, like the final inhale before a storm. The funeral service was held at Crestwood Memorial Chapel. Small, expensive, exclusive. Of course Evelyn insisted on it. The moment I stepped onto the grounds, whispers followed me like perfume. She's the widow. Didn't she walk out on him? She still got everything though, right? I didn't correct them. I wore black, sleek and understated. My veil was lace, a whisper of grief draped over stone-cold resolve. I nodded politely to guests, offered the right amount of somberness and positioned myself exactly where I needed to be. Front row, center aisle, undeniable. I was Clara Monroe Carter, the grieving wife, the legally acknowledged widow, and the last person Ethan saw before he died. I owned this scene. And that drove Vanessa insane. She arrived late as usual, dragging Mason behind her like a poorly staged prop. Her dress was too tight. Too loud. Her makeup smudged just enough to imply she had cried, but not enough to hide the glitter eyeliner. Mason looked confused, bored, and more interested in the funeral snacks than the casket. Vanessa didn't sit next to me. She chose the row behind, muttering loud enough for the nearest guests to hear. He didn't even want a big funeral, she said with a sniff. Clara insisted. She always liked making things about her. I didn't react. Not yet. The service ended with hollow words and forced sympathy. A few close friends shared memories. Evelyn sobbed into a monogrammed handkerchief. Vanessa dabbed her eyes dramatically every 5 minutes. When it was all over, I stood in the reception hall sipping from a crystal glass of flat champagne, preparing to leave. That's when he appeared. A man in a gray suit, tall, clean-shaven, carrying a briefcase that looked too polished for this place. "Mrs. Monroe?" he asked, approaching. I turned, poised and unreadable. "Yes. My name is Jeremy Cole. I'm an attorney. I represent Mr. Carter's private estate." A few guests perked up nearby. "There's a will?" I asked evenly. He nodded. "Second one. Recently updated. He requested it be read publicly after the funeral." I tilted my head. Of course he did. Within minutes, the guests were ushered back into the chapel. Jeremy stood at the podium, opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. The moment he began reading, I knew this wasn't Ethan's original will. This one had teeth. "I, Ethan James Carter," Jeremy read, "hereby leave the total sum of my private holdings, approximately $5 million, to my biological son." The air in the room shifted. Vanessa shot to her feet, eyes gleaming. "That's Mason," she said loudly. "He's Ethan's son." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jeremy raised a hand. "I'll need you to remain seated." Vanessa didn't. "Everyone here knows the truth. Ethan and I. We're not legally married," I interrupted, my voice like ice. "Nor are you listed anywhere as a guardian or next of kin." Vanessa narrowed her eyes. "He's still the father." Jeremy adjusted his glasses. "Do you have a paternity test to verify that?" The room fell still. Vanessa blinked. "No, but look at him. Mason looks just like Ethan." Jeremy remained professional. "Unfortunately, under state inheritance law, visual similarity does not constitute legal proof." I can get one," she said quickly. "Yes. I'll do it now." Jeremy closed the folder. "Mr. Carter is deceased. A paternity test would have needed to be on file prior to his death. Without it, this version of the will cannot be executed." Vanessa's voice broke into a shriek. "You're lying. You're doing this for her." She pointed at me with a trembling, manic finger. "You bribed him. You turned him against me." I met her eyes with quiet calm. "You did that all by yourself. She's just bitter because Ethan loved me." Vanessa yelled, her voice rising in pitch. "You were the outsider. I was his first love. And yet I was the one he married," I said coolly. That was when she snapped. Vanessa lunged at Jeremy, screeching, "You lying piece of..." Gasps erupted as she shoved the lawyer's shoulder, grabbing at his folder. "Give it to me. I'll sue you. I'll..." 2 security guards rushed in and pulled her back. "Let me go," she howled. "He wanted Mason to have it. He told me." Evelyn stumbled toward her, crying, grabbing at her arm. "Stop, Vanessa. Stop." Vanessa kicked, clawed, and shrieked until they finally dragged her from the room. Jeremy smoothed his tie. As I was saying, he continued calmly, in the absence of DNA evidence, the legal beneficiary of Ethan Carter's estate reverts to his surviving spouse. All eyes turned to me. I didn't flinch. I simply nodded. Thank you, Mr. Cole. 10 minutes later, I stood alone in the hallway, sipping my second cup of tea as if none of it had happened. Evelyn approached me with tear-stained cheeks. Claire, please. I know how things ended, but, Mason, he's just a boy. I stared at her. A boy you pushed into my arms while his mother slept in until noon? He's all I have left. Then maybe you should have taught him not to hit people with toy swords. She flinched. I softened my tone, but only slightly. You knew the truth, Evelyn. You knew what Vanessa and Ethan were. And you let it happen. You let them bleed me dry. Her lips trembled. I was just trying to keep the family together. No, I said, you were trying to keep your options open. Now the bill's due. She stepped closer, whispering. Please, if you just say he's Ethan's son, we could still claim. I stepped back. I'm not lying for you. Not for Vanessa. Not for Ethan. And certainly not for a child who's been trained to treat people like tools. You'll regret this, she said, desperation curdling into bitterness. I already did, I replied. Once. I left the chapel without saying goodbye. As I stepped into the afternoon sun, the clouds finally parted. For the first time in months, the light didn't feel sharp or judgmental. It felt like mine. Behind me, the Carter legacy was crumbling. But ahead of me, there was something new. Not just freedom. Power. And I wasn't afraid to use it. In the weeks that followed Ethan's funeral, my phone didn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers. Voicemails from sobbing relatives. Messages from Evelyn asking for one more chance. Even a few distant cousins of Ethan's trying to check in and subtly bring up financial support. I blocked them all. $5 million sat in my account. And this time, not a single cent would be spent cleaning up after other people's messes. Vanessa was the first to unravel. After attacking Jeremy, the lawyer, she was sentenced to 15 days in detention for assault and contempt of court. She screamed through every second of her arrest, of course, claiming she was being silenced. While she was away, her unpaid debts came knocking. Apparently, while Ethan was sick and I was funding the household, Vanessa had been funding her delusions. Maxed out credit cards, beauty treatments, designer bags. All under aliases and fake businesses. Debt collectors began circling like vultures. One of them, a particularly unpleasant man with a gold tooth and no patience, called me. Ms. Monroe, we believe you may be in contact with Vanessa Lee. She owes. I interrupted him. Absolutely not in contact, but I'd be happy to provide her updated location. Silence. Is that legal? He asked. I'm just a helpful citizen, I said sweetly. He laughed. You're a dangerous woman. You have no idea. Evelyn clung on longer. She called me crying one night, her voice shaking with desperation. Clara, the mortgage. I'm behind. They're going to foreclose. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't do this, she begged. I'm your mother-in-law. I raised Ethan. You also raised a man who used people until they broke. Congratulations. She gasped like I'd slapped her. You're cruel, she said. No, I corrected. I just learned. And I'm not funding your regrets. 2 days later, the foreclosure went through. I bought the house at auction. And transferred every penny from the sale directly to the psychiatric care facility I'd checked her into the week after Ethan's death. She had started screaming at strangers in grocery stores, calling them thieves and liars. I wasn't about to let her endanger others. She now lived in a private ward with full-time supervision and a schedule of calming therapies. All covered, generously, by the proceeds of the house. The irony? She used to say that house was her legacy. Now it was her cage. And Mason? He vanished into the arms of one of Vanessa's distant cousins after her release. A woman with 4 kids and a 1-bedroom apartment. I didn't look into the details. He wasn't my responsibility. Never had been. Once the storm finally passed, I packed up and left the city. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Didn't leave a forwarding address. Just booked a flight, took my savings and started again. A small beachside town became my refuge. The kind with pastel houses, unpaved roads, and the scent of salt clinging to your skin like perfume. I bought a cottage with white shutters and a lemon tree in the yard. It was mine. No one else's name on the deed. No hidden clauses. No guilt. No strings. Just mine. I spent my mornings walking barefoot on the sand, feeling the waves curl around my ankles. Locals nodded at me kindly, unaware they were greeting a woman who had been a doormat in another life, and was now a queen without a crown. Afternoons I read novels I never had time for before. Baked. Sometimes I painted, terribly but freely. Evenings I sat on the porch with a glass of wine and watched the sun melt into the ocean. One night I found myself whispering into the wind. I survived you, Ethan. Twice. The waves carried no reply. Good. Let the silence speak for once. People say karma takes time. But sometimes, it moves fast. Like a slap across the face. A knock on the door you weren't expecting. A signature on a form that sets you free. And sometimes karma doesn't come as revenge. Sometimes it comes as peace. A few weeks later a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a single sentence. We hope you're well. Mason still asks about you. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't going to be guilt. Not again. I lit the letter with a match and watched the flame dance. The paper curled, blackened, then floated into ash. I scattered it on the sand that night just before the tide came in. Let the ocean take it. Let the past drown. I wasn't a widow clinging to grief. I wasn't a victim waiting to be chosen. I wasn't even the hero of this story. I was the author. And I had finally written them out of it. The book. One evening an old friend from the city called me. She didn't know what had happened. Not really. Just the rumors. Heard you inherited a fortune, she joked. I sipped my tea. You could say that. And Ethan? He really left you everything. I smiled. No, I said. He left me a mess. I turned it into freedom. She paused. You sound happy. I looked around at my little lemon tree, my cottage glowing in the sunset, the sea humming in the background. I am, I said. And for the first time in 2 lives. It was true. The end.